Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solve them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
So good. What did you want to start with? We've been sharing lots of articles the last couple of days. I liked your one on the wrong argument for a 4-hour workday.
Yeah, we could start there. Yeah, I think the 4-hour work week has kind of had a bit of a resurgence. There's new trials coming out across the world. Different countries are kind of piloting new 4-day work week tests, specifically ones, I think for the most part, that are 32-hour weeks. So that's kind of the unique part of that. Not trying to fit 40 hours into 4 days, but 32 hours across 4 days. But there was an article published last year talking about why productivity isn't the best argument for a 4-day work week. So when we see the 4-day work week kind of studies come out, they often show that productivity increases, which is interesting, right? Because people have less time to do things. But I think fundamentally, we could also consider, and this is what the opinion article, discusses, is that, does it have to be about just productivity? Can we talk about people's right to leisure time and, getting more enjoyment out of their lives and kind of like it's better for us as a society, not necessarily that it's always about productivity.
Yeah, that's what I actually quite liked about the article you sent, is that it's about people being whole people. And we just had a 4-day break because of the Jubilee weekend. And it's been quite weird coming back to Monday, because I actually, for the first time, okay, that's not true. Thursday, I actually ended up working most of the day. I was supposed to take Thursday off, but I ended up working. But Friday was the first time I actually refused to look at my email. And except for one phone call that I had to take because it was urgent, I didn't touch email, I didn't touch Teams, I didn't look at WhatsApp, any of the work groups. And I found that we had such a good weekend as a family, because I wasn't always thinking about there's always something to do at work. And if something did pop up, I just put a reminder in my phone, and it's all popped up Monday morning, 8 o'clock. And I've got a dozen or so reminders of things that I thought about to look at for the week. And I think that's one of the things, as much as I say the whole person, I still think you are productive because you are still going to think about work. But the interesting thing is when you're relaxing and you're thinking about work, you are far more strategic about what you're thinking about, because you're letting your mind ruminate on the problem you're trying to solve. You're joining dots together. You're thinking about stuff you've forgotten that you said you would do that you haven't done. And it's probably on a task list somewhere, so it hasn't been forgotten. It's just not front and center. And some of the things, sometimes I think that the benefit of that is figuring out the optimized way of looking at something. So we all know that if you want to tackle something, that there's going to be a good order to tackle it. It's not always A, B, and C. Sometimes it's to do C first, then A, then B, because that actually gives you a better result. All your dependencies are force you to do that. So I'm very for a shorter week, but I'm very for the ability to have free time to think in a stress-free way, so that you're not just reacting to all the fires in front of you.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point around just the opportunity to reflect, and that's not necessarily built into work schedules that are often just fully packed, right, between meetings and projects and chats and everything else. It's really hard to carve out time to think, which makes me think of, another element of what we need to consider with the 4-day work week that I haven't seen brought up in any of these articles, but I think naturally, right, if you're going to condense work into 4 days, you have to reconsider the number of meetings on your calendar. You have to reconsider maybe the number of projects or responsibilities that a person is given, because it's interesting. I think, we often see the example of, well, I just cut out all the time I spent scrolling social media and it was fine. And I magically did all of my work in those 4 days. But I don't think that's the universal kind of experience. I know if I cut out my, Instagram time, I would not be left with 8 hours to fill. So, that wouldn't cut 8 hours out of my work week. So I just think there's like the time component that kind of gets taken for granted in these conversations, that it does mean that some people or some roles wouldn't be able to do the same amount of things that they do every week unless you could cut meetings or somehow unlock new efficiencies. I think it'd be tough for every role to be truly more productive, but I think that's okay in the grand scheme of things, because as you say, there are other benefits, right? Like thinking more strategically, creatively, and just being less burnt out and happier. So maybe more likely to stay with the company over the long term. It's not all just about output in a given week.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I think about it from a parenting point of view, and I, we've joked about it as parents. We didn't realize how much time we wasted until we had one kid. And then we didn't realize how much time we wasted until we had 2 kids. Because, you're always on the go. And my wife's been ill this week, so I've done a lot more stuff than I normally would, because there's one of me doing 2 people's things, really. And I think what it teaches you, and I think, being a parent is a good thing for this, is it teaches you to be ruthless with your time. And I think we've talked about the 6-hour rule. You can only really be productive for 6 hours a day. The rest of the time is going to be not as good as that 6 hours, let's say. I think that comes out in deep work. But you can most times get all your work done for a day in 6 hours if you just knuckle down and you're not distracted and whatever. And I think this is where technology has hurt us, and the pandemic has exacerbated this. Technology has almost helped us to go into more and more back-to-back meetings than to actually make us more and more productive. And I'm not saying meetings are necessarily always bad. I think there's a time and a place for them. I was actually talking to one of my team members before this call, and we're discussing how she was away for 2 weeks, and she didn't let anybody know for those meetings that she ran what to do in those meetings. So, people are adults and they can get on with it. So people would attend the meetings or would cancel the meeting. But, if you're away for 2 weeks, that's a very good sign of how much you have shared collaboratively to allow people to carry on without you. It's not about being expendable, but it is about saying, well, if I'm not here, this stuff should carry on without me. I shouldn't be the bottleneck. And I think if you now look at the complications of a 32-hour work week or a 40-hour, moving down to 4 days, because my cousin works 4 days a week, and she just works long days to make up for the 5th day. But there's got to be overlaps. And in order for those overlaps to work, there needs to be better communication. And the systems need to cater for those overlaps. Because you're still going to have people working there's still going to be customers coming in 5 days a week, 6 days a week in some cases. And if you look at how shift work works, that's why shifts are shifts, because you need to always have continuous cover. So I think it's a possible thing, but it does change the dynamic for a lot of businesses. And I think 32 hours is like a minimum. I don't think it's the max. There's still going to be people that are going to put in more hours because they want to, or they have to, based on the project and the position that's in, or something like that.
Yeah, I'd be curious, the average across corporate America, how close it is to 40. I would I have a suspicion it would be higher than that. I feel like working 40 hours itself sometimes feels like it would be a luxury. But
I had to laugh at you saw the stuff with Elon Musk and his demanding that his staff work 40 hours in the office that they are supposed to be in, not a satellite office. Now, it's very easy to criticize what he's saying without actually understanding how their business operates. You know, if you're a factory building things, your exec should be, who runs the factory, should be in that factory. I would agree, you know, a couple of hours a day. Not necessarily 40 hours a day, 40 hours a week, but you know, whatever it is, they need to understand what their guys are going through so that they can make the right decisions. But if you're we're a software house, we talk all day long about stuff. We look at stuff all the time on shared screens. Very rarely would I believe if being in a room would make things work any quicker. And I was actually listening to something the other day about how brainstorming actually doesn't work. And the reason why brainstorming doesn't work is because 99% of people that come to a brainstorming session come in unprepared with no ideas. And the person with the strongest views tends to own the meeting or get their idea through. And all you've done is waste 5 people's time, 10 people's time, whatever it is, for them to just agree with the idea. Now, if you want to do effective brainstorming, what you need to do is basically tell everyone to carve out an hour, go think about the problem, come up with 5 solutions, and then meet together and go through all 5 solutions or 3 solutions or whatever it is, and have a set of criteria and be objective about it, and basically pick the one that meets the criteria the best, which is not a brainstorming session. That's a prioritization discussion. Or a filtering thing, which to me makes a lot more sense. And if you look at the likes of Amazon and Apple and those guys, that's how they do it. There's no, they don't, you know, Steve Jobs drove a lot of things, but he would do it a certain way that there was accountability and ownership of the idea by someone in the team. And each would come with their own ideas, and then they would pick the idea that owner would run it through to the end, but they had other ideas to compare it to, you know, and some unbiased ideas. I think it's a you know, again, collaboration and communication is the biggest thing to all of this. The tools, the technology just helps that.
That's an interesting thought about brainstorming. I think it depends. It depends if you have what it is, and if you have multiple people who will have opinions on it, you can have a good discussion. But sometimes it can be, whoever has the loudest voice in the room. But I think also things like whiteboarding techniques and different like exercises to get people kind of in the headspace can help.
Well, look, if everyone comes in cold and no one knows what the problem is, then sure, then you'll probably have exactly the same result because everyone's coming clear. But then it's going to come again to who's got strong personalities, who is the a lot of people fall into the structural issues of, oh, that's my boss, I can't argue with my boss, or that person's important, so I can't argue with them. All those things. So you got to, those are things to watch out for. But you also will have people in a room that might have the answer, might have the idea, but they don't like talking in a public place. So they don't say anything. And they sit there for 45 minutes, maybe chipping in with one or two little thoughts that are safe. And what you really want for them is to take a risk and give you the what they really think. And then you find out, I've had this happen so many times in my career, where you're 3 months down the road, and then this person pulls you aside and says, listen, this is never going to work. This is what I think we should have done. And I meant to tell you this 3 months ago, but I just wasn't comfortable. And then you're like, holy crap, if I'd known this stuff, we would have done it this way to begin with, and we would have saved ourselves all this pain. And it's just learning your team and how they work. And that's why I think, you've got to give people time to think and prepare. And the method that I think Amazon uses, what was it called? PRFAQ. If you want to bring in an idea, you have to write a PR FAQ, which is a press release and the FAQs for your idea. So how would you go to market with this? And then what are the common questions? What are the common answers? You've got to write that up before you even have the meeting. And that's got to be shared out with everyone. And then when you get to the meeting, everyone has to read the PR FAQ for 15 minutes before you actually start the meeting to make sure everyone's read it. And then everyone's on the same page, and then you could debate it and argue. And I think if you do stuff like that, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I agree. That sounds kind of fun, actually. Pitching your own idea in that way. Fun to me. But again, that'd be something that if we had a 4-day work week and then 3 days off to kind of think, I feel like more of that would come forward. For myself, at least, I think. Yeah.
Well, that's the point. I mean, if you can take that day off, and I've been trying to, but it hasn't worked this last couple of weeks. I've been trying to make Fridays my day like that, where I don't have any meetings and I can think about stuff, and I'm sitting at home and I'm doing stuff. I'm still working, but I'm trying not to be distracted by other people's emergencies, and that's not as easy all the time. I was looking at my Friday nights; it's jam packed because I'm out at an event tomorrow. But that's a self-discipline. That's not a company-accepted method. And your problem with these sorts of things, especially when you're dealing with customers, is you might be working to a 4-day jam-packed week, and then the 5th day is your admin day. But your customers may work a 5-day week, and every day is up for grabs, and they want to meet with you on a Friday. So you're constantly eroding your own time for that stuff. So you've got to find it. And I was up there in the morning about 3 o'clock, and that was like the best morning, because I worked from like 3 a.m. to like 7, and it was just quiet, and I could just do my own thing. And by the time everyone else was waking up in the house, I was like 100 miles an hour, going. Problem with that is that you're 100 miles an hour and everyone else is still waking up, so they're like 20 miles an hour. So you got to watch for that too.
Yeah, that's interesting about when you are trying to carve out your own work style versus anything that's sort of structured by the organization or the customers you work with. It does make it so that you're kind of running your own little experiments to see, what works best for how you work, which everyone is unique, right? Everyone needs to figure out what works best for them. But if you don't have any company-wide no meeting days or policies around the number of meetings per week, or I guess etiquette around messaging at certain times or anything like that, then everyone's just kind of left to their own devices, and it's harder to protect your time because you don't have this kind of like social contract around acceptable boundaries.
Yeah, exactly.
We should find someone to talk to from who works in France, because I have long been fascinated by their, the way they put into law the not being able to answer emails and work more than their work day, like the strictness of that.
Yeah, I must admit we haven't done many guests this year. For various reasons, but I'll have a look around and see. Maybe we get someone that's been on before to come and tell us how things have changed since we last spoke to them, and get their insight to that.
Maybe very interesting. Was there anything else you wanted to chat about today?
There's some interesting stuff. The return of the Sunday Scaries. I thought that was just a funny article in some respects. Specifically with this 4-day weekend that we just had in the UK, and the anxiety of people coming back to work on a Monday. We used to call it, and it's in Afrikaans, swak hour, which is bad hour, like 7 o'clock at night. There's a TV show called Carte Blanche, which is like an investigative news show, And it's basically depressing because they just go and find out all this corruption and whatever, and you just really don't want to know about it. But anyway, that was always the sign that it was the end of the weekend. And then because it was the end of the weekend, you knew the school or work was starting the next day. And they talk about in this article, it normally hits you at 3:59 on a Sunday, basically this daunting feeling that it's the end of the weekend. And I suppose that's because this, usually you got kids, you got to get them fed and bathed and all the rest of it, and you just know and you start thinking about work stuff more predominantly because now you got to be at work the next day. I thought that was quite a funny, not funny, but an interesting article nonetheless.
Yeah, the Sunday scaries will get you. It does make me think in terms of the 4-day work week. I think we've mostly been talking like you're having a 3-day weekend, right? I think that's the most common format that people kind of gravitate towards. You either take Friday or Monday off, but there are 4-day work weeks where people take a day off kind of in between. They split their week. So you don't get the benefit of like another day without Sunday scaries. But I guess you get more coverage kind of if your business needs to not have, everyone off 3 days in a row. You could split it up that way. But then your one day off is kind of like a default Sunday because you never get to fully relax because you always have to work the next day.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because if you think about the shifting of those days, I mean, I think it's still going to be a Monday to Friday. I think you'd still have the weekend as the weekend because, socially, it would be very difficult to move everyone to another. I mean, I think they're moving the UAE, they're moving them to Monday to Friday now as well, as opposed to being a Sunday to Thursday, which is what they were before. But you've got to have something that overlaps, and I think it's just really about coverage. I mean, you could, in theory, if you work 6 hours a day for 5 days, that's only 30 hours of working. But if people take lunch breaks and they commute and all that stuff, do you count all those things as part of those days, or those hours, or is that excluded? Or if you add it together, all of it, then you've actually got more than a working hour week anyway.
Yeah. I think in the US it's largely excluded, but we are known for not taking our vacation time and working too much. So.
Well, I mean, that's, they were saying that we should, the UK has 8 public holidays a year on average, but most countries have 12. So the unions here are trying to push for 12, for the extra 4.
Wow.
South Africa has them. And to be honest, I think the technology now exists that to the extent that, and companies can globalize so much easier because of the technology. Why can't you do that? Why not have because the holidays are important, to celebrate things. I mean, South Africa has lots of them for lots of various reasons. But this Jubilee, for example, having the extra holiday, people were happy. And it's not because they weren't working per se, it's because they got time to spend time with other people. And I think that's what I think we need more of is the social aspects, because it makes your work better. If you're slogging every day and looking at screens all day long, you don't build any relationships with anybody per se, unless you met them in person beforehand or during that process. Because there's always a barrier, physically between you and that person, because it's a screen. So I think it would be good. And then, if one country's on holiday, like we were on holiday for 2 days last week, but the US was on holiday, India was on holiday, Ireland wasn't on holiday, South Africa wasn't on holiday, the work still happens. There's still people to pick up the coverage. And then vice versa. If we're not on holiday and someone else is, we pick up the slack, and it all balances out in the long run.
Yeah. it is pretty funny to think about the UK needing more bank holidays, because I feel like we have, the joke in the US is that, the UK folks are always away on bank holidays. So it's all relative, I guess, but yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, if South Africa, if you look at April, that's like 12 holidays or something silly like that. Or Easter weekend, you've got 2 or 3 public holidays for whatever reason, and there they don't map them to weekends. They map them in the middle of the week, so you can have like a Wednesday or a Thursday holiday and a Friday as a workday, which most people take off anyway. So now you've got a 4-day, it's a 2-day work week and a 5-day holiday. So I mean, it is. I guess it is all relative. But I think the point is, for me, is whatever the contractual number of hours is that you've got to have, you've got the ability with the technology to deliver an output. So it should be results orientated. And if you decide to do in 32 hours or 30 hours or 50 hours, shouldn't matter. Just get it done.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it too. It's what you decide to do with the time that you have, but then also the ability to protect your time against too many meetings. So. Exactly.
And on that topic, I have a meeting.
Okay.
As I'm sure you do, or you're coming to.
Yes.
I will set to. I'm not around Thursday. I think. Did I cancel Thursday with you? Can't remember. But we'll chat a bit later.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool.
Take care.
Thanks, Heather. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter @the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.